I'm curious to know what happens to consciousness when the brain dies or the body dies. Does consciousness just cease to exist, or is it conscious that something just happened and then it just disappears? And this is from your experience traveling the world and interacting with people. I'm curious to know.
You probably get very different answers.
Yeah. Would you like to direct it to Sean or to me or both?
I think you
What's your
should
choice?
both say
It's your
something
choice.
about this.
Go ahead, Alan, you go first.
Okay. The human mind, human states of consciousness, emotions, desires, the whole array of mental processes we experience, quite evidently arise in dependence upon the brain functioning. And as the brain is impaired, damaged through Alzheimer's, through brain injury, motorcycle accident, disease, and so forth, various faculties of sight, of memory, and so forth, as we well know, and we now know with much greater sophistication than ever before, the correlations between the two. That human mind that does clearly arise, and I'll choose my words very carefully, arises in dependence upon and is correlated to brain function, ceases to exist. If it's arising in dependence upon the brain and the brain ceases to function as a brain, then the support's gone. Now, if your awareness of the mind is, to be very blunt, superficial, you just have a casual kind of folk psychology awareness of what's going on in your mind, and Sean in his beautiful book emphasized the importance of self-awareness, that this is something important and could be refined. What I would suggest is the Buddhists have about a 2,500-year head start on us on that one. This does not advocate a doctrine or their conclusions, but let me report on something they found. And I offer it only as an empirical hypothesis that can be tested. What I found, because I've been studying Western theories, materialistic theories of mind for about 30 years now, what's interesting is I've not found one theory, and John knows perfectly well there's a lot of theories, property dualism, substitutism, and so forth. There's some neuroscientists believe consciousness doesn't exist. There's a philosopher who believes that appearances don't exist. There's some really white, cockeyed theories out there. What I've noticed they all have in common is not a single one is empirically testable. They're just beliefs. What happens if you spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day probing into the nature of your mind from a first-person perspective, and your mind, with all of its human thoughts, perceptions, memories, and so forth, is calmed to the point of silence? You comment in your book, Sean, silence is possible, but your heart keeps on beating. Fine, but withdraw your awareness from your body. Withdraw it entirely into the mind, which happens when you're dreaming, when you're going to deep sleep. Let your mind shut down in terms of all of the explicit cognitive activity, emotional and so forth. And what has been discovered, and I'll just say has been discovered, is that you move beyond that whole dimension, which is the only dimension that modern science knows about, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, that's it. You move beyond both of those. You penetrate through both of those to an underlying, now I'm going to use the word underlying continuum of consciousness that's purely mental, but it's not human. There's nothing human about it. It has no gender, no personal history. It's a simple continuum of cognizance, a flow of consciousness. And it, and not the brain, is the repository of memories. Now here's the hypothesis. I'm not asking anybody to believe this. Just as Sean said, you may not believe what I'm saying, so feel free to disagree. I'm saying something that is not simply conjecture or belief, but this is something that's been discovered and rediscovered hundreds and hundreds of times over the last 2,500 years and longer. Penetrate through your psyche to a deeper level of consciousness, an underlying level of consciousness that isn't even human. And that's the actual repository of memories. The brain is the keyboard, this underlying continuum is the hard drive, if we want to use the hackneyed computer analogy. Now that's said to be a discovery that's been replicated thousands of times. And they'll tell you exactly how you can put this to the test. And then, one way to put to the test is tap into that and see if you can retrieve memories from a previous life. Now, of course, you may come up with nothing, but very obviously, you may come up with sheer fantasy. I was Cleopatra. I was, whatever, all the goofy stuff. But what happens if you come up memories, and then somebody who's open-minded, skeptical, critical, but is open-minded said, let's see whether those memories are veridical or not, and whether you have any way of knowing that information about another person's life that seems to have the same continuum as your own. This is a theory that can be tested, and so my vision, my passion now, as I'm getting to be something of an old geezer, as I was telling Marcelo over dinner, is to create a contemplative scientific research facility where people are trained for 5, 10 years, rigorously, but with no dogma, no brainwashing, no indoctrination, radical empiricism to probe through, penetrate through this dimension of mind, which is clearly human, to deeper levels and explore it and see whether these alleged discoveries from the past can be replicated now, but bring in the scientists from the get-go. So I'm looking at Tuscany as a place to do this. It's a nice place.
Good taste.
And create a contemplative research facility for people who are simply open-minded, but willing to put in the immensely hard work of 10, 12, 14 hours of rigorous training per day for 5, 10 years, and bring in the psychologists, the neuroscientists. I think Marcelo has said maybe he'll come as a physicist.
I'll volunteer.
Volunteer, we got to volunteer. We want physicists because a measurement problem, the role of the observer in quantum mechanics, is not a solved problem. And let's find out together what's true. Because what we know is we don't know what's true. In the modern scientific context, we don't know what's true. What are the origins of consciousness? How does it interface with the brain? What happens at death? We may have beliefs that we're strong convinced are true, and that's fine. Show me how you test that. This is a theory that can be tested, should be tested. And let's just find out what's true.